So tomorrow I am running my second Endures quarterly pause and reset for the year. And if you're listening to this, it's at 1 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time for 45 minutes. And if you register, it's free. You do get the recording because I myself see the importance of pausing and looking back once a week, once a quarter, once a month, once a year, once every 3 years to see how far we have come. And while I was preparing for it, I thought to myself how I haven't actually shared on the podcast before my special report, which I've written specifically for service business owners, and it's called Crossing the Aspiration Gap. So I'm just going to talk you through a few of the key points from that today. So I'm Suzanne Rath, and you're listening to Endures for your daily dose of endurance leadership and life lessons. And essentially what this report is it's an analysis, and if you're watching the video, you'll see this, of why service businesses plateau and how we can move from effort to legacy. So you'll have heard me speaking before about how often we are great technicians, and that's why we set up a business. So whether you're a tradie or a lawyer or a financial planner or a physiotherapist, whatever the case might be, you are great at what you do and you think, well, I can probably do things better or, make more money or leave more of a legacy if I set up my own thing. And honestly, I had this conversation with one of my team recently. It's a really undersold skill in the world to actually think about the power of staying as a technician, if that's what you truly love and that's what you're good at, and think about moving laterally in your work, or think about how you can become a specialist in your clinical field or your finance field or your tradie field. All of those things, rather than starting a business, there's a real power to that. But say you go to set up your service business and you, like I did, you have this big vision, you want to achieve these things, you need other people to do that. Then you start to move from being a technician through to a manager, through to a CEO. And I have written this special report for service-based business owners who essentially are already established. They go to the networking events, they look great and successful on the surface. I went to a networking event yesterday and somebody asked me about two of our clinics, which we have closed because we've consolidated and created more space and therefore more efficiency through moving from 4 clinics to 2. And, they kind of looked at me like this was almost like a failing. And the thing is, you can look externally successful through having all these things, but, internally, I talk about some of the things that happen to us, right? Like our energy is fluctuating, time just feels tight. You feel like you're approving every little thing. And somehow you feel like you're doing less and less of the work that you actually love. So closing the aspiration gap is about how, we can see the patterns across professional services businesses, identify the operating state that you're currently in, and then see where you and your organization sit on that continuum. So maybe you can decide what the next step will be. And so when you move to this point where you're really established and, you look successful, sometimes internally you don't have any thinking time, or, you bring in these consultants or you do these development initiatives and your team are energized, but then the same default behavior kicks in. And so there's a reflection question in here, which is, where does the quality actually depend on your presence rather than a standard? Now, the second point that I make here, and this is something not just I see in my leadership work, but I hear this time and time and time again from leadership consultants, is that, people have these consultants in, or they have the training day or whatever, and they get all the ideas, but then the normal operating drift state kicks in. And so, you prioritize or deprioritize recovery, and you prioritize being quickly responsive, and you prioritize, putting a Band-Aid on over rebuilding the structures. And so you end up in this state where you're 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. And I have 100% been there, where you're the only stabilizing mechanism as the founder, and it is absolutely exhausting. And so the difference between moving from this constantly reactive state to this, limitless state, we think that it's going to be time. We think time is going to fix it, but it actually involves crossing a series of gates and closing the gate behind us, right? And that's some of the work that I do. Now, the third myth, and it's something I bang on about on the podcast all the time, is that tools will enhance performance. No, they will not. Go and have a look at the J-shaped curve of productivity that came in with electricity, that came in with computers. Now we're seeing it with AI. So we need to build the human capability to thrive. And so in the report, I talk about my performance advancement pathway. And the point of that is installing this operational system, not just for the owner, but also a way for teams to get on board and to build not just the, traditional, almost seen as fluffy soft skills of leadership, but real structures of, designing your work, of connecting back to the vision, of, building that grit, building that adaptability that's essential in the modern world. What this does is it stops us from entering this over functioning stage where you're constantly, as an owner, stepping in earlier, carrying context, absorbing risk. And so in this, there's quite a few reflection questions. There's also what endurance leaders do differently, and this personal and business operating systems that they put in place. So you can grab it. It is downloadable on my homepage on my website, which I have in the show notes each time. The Endurance framework. And just see the difference between, our default system of these scattered priorities, of staggered progress, of, diluted brilliance, through to where we actually want to be, right? Through unshakable focus to unstoppable momentum and to actualized potential. So the difference between the world of constant scatter, where we have this aspiration gap, and this reinforced performance environment, which we can build. We can move through the zones of reactive to emerging, emerging to thriving, and then thriving to limitless. So an invitation in the end of it towards your next moves, but just a reminder when you're listening to the podcast today that this true endurance isn't actually achieved just by working harder. So it's about the standards, the structures, the systems that we build around us so that performance also carries beyond us. So again, if you found this interesting, you can download the Aspiration Gap, Crossing the Aspiration Gap, and the special report in my show notes. And I'll see you tomorrow for more from Endures. Bye.